Hey, before we start today, please rate and review this show. If you're on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to this and you can do that, take the 5 seconds right now and do that. We are going to give you a Restless sticker and enter you to win one of the books we're giving away. Michael will explain more at the end of the show. Okay, thanks. This is Restless. Welcome back to Restless, a post-mortem on Together for the Gospel. Isn't that right, Pastor Michael?
Here we go. It was the last word. It was the end of an era in so many ways. Or was it the end? That's a question. That's the question that we have. And we're going to be discussing that tonight. And we're not alone. I don't have a baby right now. And so I know. I'm not saying that there's I will have a baby at some point here, by the way. At some point, I'm going to have a baby dropped off with me.
But making up for that baby's absence is Restless's live correspondent on the ground at T4G, the last word. Peter, welcome to Restless.
Thank you very much. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
That's great. Well, we love long-time listeners and we love first-time callers. Peter, I didn't use your last name because we never know what people want us to say about them on the internet. But why don't you tell us and tell the listening world about yourself?
Well, I'm certainly not ashamed. My name is Peter Garris, and I am an auctioneer from Columbus, Ohio, and I also am an amateur at best theologian and studier of all things theological and gospel related. I am getting my MDiv at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, doing it all online because my daily work takes me all over the country. But great to listen to you guys. Actually found you guys from the Reformed Brotherhood. I believe you were as one of their either affirmations or denials or something along those lines. And I thought, oh, check this out.
I hope we were an affirmation.
I can't promise anything.
But, yeah, I think we were, because I think I remember it. I think it was when we had first joined the Society of Reformed Podcasters, and we had, I think at that time we had Tony come on and tell us about the Reformed Brotherhood and the society and all that, and so I have at least the hope that it was an affirmation.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I've always wondered if someone would do like a complete study and put all the affirmations and denials into one like spreadsheet or something, so we could go through them all, because I think they're repeating themselves. But I love the Brotherhood. I think I'm a supporter of them as well on Patreon, just as I am with you guys. I'd encourage everyone to do that. And I've learned a lot from listening, and hopefully it can contribute a small amount today.
Yeah, we appreciate it. This so earlier today. So speaking of Patreon, we have a Patreon Telegram group that if you give even on the lowest level, which is only $3 a month to Patreon, you can join the Telegram group. And we've had just like a rolling, like somewhat, I don't know if I'd call it heated, but like a pretty intense debate about what's going on with the potential, shutting down of Roe versus Wade and all this going on. And just a little while ago, I don't remember when it was, but I sort of, it's just been going all day with long posts back and forth. And then Peter just wrote on something like, being a leader's hard. We should pray for our leaders. And I just found that so good and just so profound. And so, hey, that's a good reason to be on Telegram. And you can hang out with Peter. You can hang out with us a little bit.
It's a great, interesting, diverse group there. Peter, we have one question though, before we get to the subject at hand, Together for the Gospel, the end of the YRR as we know it. Peter, would you describe yourself as currently a Baptist?
Currently a Baptist? No, I'm not.
Oh,
I'm not currently a Baptist. I currently attend a Wesleyan church with my family. We were invited there 10 years ago, and they've served us very well. And it's brought me to where I'm at right now. Although I would say that though I would describe myself obviously on this podcast as Reformed, as in studying Wesleyan and Arminianism, I think there are. We certainly share more than we differ on, at least if you would go by the online debates back and forth. So I wouldn't say that I was ever firmly in the Arminian camp. I went to that church and got a lot from it, and then I started studying theology and reading the Bible. And I would say that reading the Bible is a good way to become Reformed, but that may be a hot take that some people don't appreciate.
Hey, well, Peter just said he goes to a Wesleyan church, so we have to ask him to leave. Sorry, everyone. Just kidding. Just kidding.
It sounds like we're interviewing the perfect person to talk about being together for the gospel.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm literally together for the gospel.
That's right. He is not hidden.
I love that, by the way. I really appreciate that.
He is not being stuck and hidden in Pastor Michael's Presbyterian bunker where the divergence of disagreement is allowed is Romans 11. Outside of that, there has to be total uniformity. So, Peter, we're so thankful. I think this will be a interesting conversation, especially as we, having previewed this conference, knowing it was coming, wondering for the right way to talk about it afterwards. But we're glad you're here. So, fill our listeners in who may not be familiar with the conference and what happened and why last week was particularly significant.
Yeah, so I have been following many of the pastors and speakers that were at Together for the Gospel, and like many of you, Mark Dever and Ligon Duncan, John Piper. And so during the pandemic, as part of my coursework, I was very fortunate to take a class with Albert Mohler on preaching. And one of his final words to us was, if there are pastors and preachers and folks that you admire or want to hear from, you should go hear them in person. Mm-hmm. And especially if you like their style and their delivery, their theology being important as well, but as you perfect your own abilities, you should go see them in person. And I took that very much to heart. As an auctioneer and someone that's on the microphone myself, I appreciate what it takes to do that, actually communicate in that way. So I thought, I want to do this. And so when they announced Together for the Gospel the last time, I thought, well, certainly there'll be other opportunities to see all these men, but there may not be an opportunity to see them all together. And so I said, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to this and see this. Really, this was my first big EVA conference.
Wow.
So never been to anything, never been to like the Gospel Coalition or things like that. So this was my first one, and it was quite an experience. I really don't know what I was expecting, but I was somewhat overwhelmed.
Wow. Is there a particular preacher there whose preaching you were looking forward to and developing your own gifts in that direction?
I really like Mark Dever. I like he has a formula for preaching where he tries to target all the various folks that will be in the congregation, or at least he anticipates being in the congregation. I'm probably wrong about this. I believe he was the only speaker that actually asked if you were not a Christian while he was there, which I think I mean, and maybe someone else did. And if I missed that from someone else, I apologize. But I just remember that's one of his criteria. And every single sermon that he does is, give the invitation and bring that up. And he did. And I was like, wow, yeah, why not? Of course. Yes, you should. Yeah. Just because there's a bunch of people that claim to be Christians here doesn't mean that they all are. And so I really wanted to hear him. Now, the one thing he also said, and I think he would say this if he were with us tonight, that the sermons that were given were not, necessarily what they would give on a Sunday.
Right.
In their pulpit, they were topical. They were, various topics. They weren't trying to exposit a specific, verse or chapter or anything like that, but they were and he did it. And so I really appreciate that. They had a lot of other great speakers as well that I'd never heard of. And admittedly, that's what he said he wanted to do. Mark Dever, when he had the conference, was he wanted to use the big names to bring you to there, but then expose you to some folks that you had not heard before. And so there was a number that I had never heard of, didn't particularly know of. I guess maybe I'd heard of a few of them, but a gentleman from Africa that I'd never heard of. Just some really great messages. So that was a lot of it, and it was a lot of fun. I will say that as well, which I think is okay for us to do, even in Presbyterian circles, to have a lot of fun. So it was good.
That's what we're here to do for the Presbyterians, indeed. Michael, it sounds like Mark Dever is probably a pretty good Baptist preacher that way, with that style of preaching, right?
Oh yeah, well, and I've really appreciated Dever as well. It's been quite a while, I think, since I've listened to him much, but that's really good. And I love hearing the desire to bring on some of the little guys. So
can I say one thing about that?
Yeah.
And we might get into this more, but actually the guy I met with who went, he actually said the really surprise standouts were these guys he'd never heard of. He mentioned this really faithful pastor from Africa and a few of these other men. He said that was really he felt like was the standouts. And so just before we go on, just so everyone here knows, Together for the Gospel was formed by these big names: Mark Dever, Ligon Duncan, CJ Mahaney. Obviously he is gone he's blacklisted, I guess we can put it that way, for better or for worse. And Albert Mohler in 2006, trying to show unity around the things that mattered most, and bring together men and women who are interested in these things. And obviously our interest in it is this became a center of New Calvinism. And so this conference has been kind of the thing as after Passion. And so for the young, restless, and reformed. And so
I heard this described once as a kind of Mecca. It's like, you make your Hajj once a year. It's like, or once what do they do it every 3 years? How did they do it?
It was every other year.
Every other year. So every other year you make your pilgrimage, and everybody gets together, and it's kind of a big, high holy day in a sense. And so I don't know, Peter, how, having been there, I've never been to this particular conference. I've been to, a number of conferences, not surprisingly, because I co-host a podcast about New Calvinist circles. I don't think I've been to any of the big New Calvinist conferences. So funny enough. But as far as that goes, have you been to any other, maybe larger, church type conferences or gatherings that you'd compare it to, or how would you contrast it from other things you've been a part of?
Well, I've been a part of a lot of professional development conferences and things of that nature. I can't say I've ever been to a church conference of this size, or really of any size, honestly.
How many people were there?
Boy, I think they were saying somewhere like 11 or 12,000.
Wow.
I believe it was over 10,000 for sure. I heard one time I heard someone say 11 and then maybe 12. So certainly 10,000 plus. One of the things that was kind of cool is the way I guess maybe this is the way his standard, but the way Mark Dever started it is he asked various groups of people to stand up. If you're pastoring a small church, a medium church, a large church, if you're all these various things, stand up just to sort of break the ice. And he said, if you're here alone, stand up. Well, I was there alone, so I stood up. There were very few people that were there alone. And it was pretty cool because a bunch of people, pastors and other folks, sought me out over the course of the 3 days to fellowship, and just saw me out, which was great, because I really wasn't there. But there was some folks that I did know that were going from other churches. Actually, another auctioneer that I know was coming from his church, and a lot of folks were there in large groups from their church. So it was either their elder board or maybe some other study group or things. So there was a lot of large church groups there, which was cool to see.
Wow. So you mentioned it was overwhelming. What was overwhelming about this big Eva pageant and preaching showdown?
The first thing that was overwhelming was there was 2 levels of the convention center. The top level was where the conference was, or where the sessions were, and then I would lack for a better term, trade show exhibit area. The lower level, the ground level, was the bookstore. And the bookstore was, I don't know how many thousand square feet of all these Christian publishers with every book they currently have in print. And so
wow.
I've certainly been to Christian bookstores, although at least in my experience, most of them are a lot bigger, selling candles and other things that aren't quite as interesting.
all the holy trinkets.
Right. And so it was pretty awesome to see just every single Christian publisher, all of their current titles ready to go, ready for sale, and could ship home for you too. So that's where I first walked into when I first got there, and I was just like, I love books. That's one thing thankful my father instilled in me was a love of books. And so I was like, okay, well, I have to control myself here. We've got to pace ourselves. We can't get overwhelmed here. And then the next overwhelming thing for me was the way that they give back to everyone that attends. Is every session you get at least one book. So you walk into the hall, and there's these big pallets, pallet after pallet after pallet of these titles that you're going to have given to you. And so that was over the course of the 3 days, you accumulate a pretty remarkable stack of books.
Wow. So it's pretty important that they have shipping available for you.
Yeah. And I had heard beforehand from someone that if you go to this thing, you need to take a empty suitcase, that the pros, and you could tell the professionals, you could tell the 4G professionals, they were rolling in with empty suitcases to the event. Man. They were prepared. And I saw them and I was like, you've been here before. This is not your first rodeo.
Wow. That's amazing. As we've mentioned before, if you are a person who runs Big Eva conferences like this and can answer to me who bought all these books that Peter was so graciously blessed with, we'd like to talk to you. Also, Christian Candle salespeople, we love to have you on the show as well. I'm sure that would be an interesting conversation. So it sounds like, the guy I know who was there, he said the big highlights for him were all the books he got, and then the musical worship. Before we ask you a few specific questions about some things you've kind of already told us that we found really interesting, what for you, maybe you've already covered, but what were your highlights from being there that week?
The singing was definitely a highlight. I grew up in a church that very traditional hymns, go to a little more contemporary church service now. So it was great to kind of get back to my roots there with the hymns. And it is, that was special. That really was just a single piano and then 11,000 people singing. And that was cool. So a lot of good old hymns, very recognizable, but then some newer ones. And I would say if I had to say one thing that I would go back for just for that, I would go back just for the 3 days worth of singing. I talked to our church small group because I actually came home, left just a little bit early from the conference so I could be home in time to help lead our small group. And I just said that corporate singing was probably the most thing I'll remember the longest.
Yeah, there's something I can imagine having that, that amount of voices gathered together, especially if it's primarily voices that, where else do you get that? I guess, where else do you find that? And you really just don't. Maybe singing like the national anthem in a big stadium or something. And that's the closest that you could ever get. And, here, obviously there's something much more meaningful about it. So.
Yeah, I was going to say that I will guess they typically, if it's like previous years, they release this music after the fact. They record it.
Yeah, I hope they do. It would be. I would buy that just to sort of remember that, because that was very special, very special time. So.
Yeah. Any other highlights?
I think the African pastor, and I'm going to pull up his name here. So Christian Lwanda, Lwanda. He really brought it, and it was phenomenal. His message was great. Also, I always enjoy Alistair Begg. His style was great, but really those that gentleman, and the panel discussions were nice as well. They tackled some tough stuff. They talked about CRT and talked about missions. Missions were a big piece of it, which was refreshing. I think it's easy to talk about a lot of political stuff, but we're not commanded, I don't think, in the Bible to talk politics very often, if ever.
Yeah. And during the conference, what I heard people talking about, yep, we're exactly these panels. Kevin DeYoung on critical race theory, and then I'm not sure who was on the missions one, but that was the other one I was told I should go. I should check out the recording of.
Yeah, it was good. Kevin DeYoung and they had a very good panel discussion. Bobby Scott was the other gentleman on there, and he convicted me with a really powerful statement. He is not a supporter of critical race theory, though he would certainly probably be someone who would say that it is not as he kept saying it's a legal theory, which it is. I would say that Kevin DeYoung and many others would say that it has crept beyond the legal theory, so they can debate that. I'm not probably qualified to talk about that, but Bobby Scott had a very good point, and that was he was born in 1964 and said he was the first generation to be born with the full rights of an American citizen, which I really fully hadn't considered that, and that was pretty powerful to hear that. So.
All right. Well, Pastor Michael, we obviously want every guest to feel welcome here on Restless, but I think it's time for me to start asking some more of the hard-hitting questions here.
Let's do it. It's what you're here for, Peter.
As
an auctioneer, you know what pressure's like a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah.
So obviously it's no surprise here that Restless is in general pretty suspicious, or as the kids say, sus of a lot of what goes by conference Christianity. Not that I would listen to any of these sermons and go, oh, that's problematic, but the entire milieu of what it means to be a disciple. However, I want to give you a chance, Peter, to tell us what is, I mean, you were there, we weren't there. What do you, in your mind, what is let's call it the right use, right? The scripture is we exist in a world where we operate, in the world, right? We have to live, we have to exist in reality as it actually exists, right? These conferences exist and they're helpful for many people, but how would you explain what you think the right use, the proper place these kinds of conferences have?
I think the right use for them is always going to be to rejuvenate the pastor, rejuvenate church leaders, rejuvenate folks that need lifted up or that need their batteries recharged. Certainly, it is biblical to take a sabbatical, whether we're obviously commanded on a weekly basis to do that. I think there's a fair amount of biblical support for more regular pausing. And while I don't think 3 days in Louisville, Kentucky really counts as a sabbatical, that may be all some folks can do. And so I think that's a way to do that, and do it in an environment where it is a safer environment. I mean, you can fall in the trap of sin anywhere. So that's not to say that going to one of these things is somehow a guardrail, but you certainly it would be going to there for the right reason. So I think that would be a good use for it. I think it would be a good use as well to go hear very good preachers who have dedicated their life to perfecting their craft, and you could pick things up for them. So I think those would be a couple positive uses. I'm a big believer in subsidiarity. So the closer we get to the family and the basic unit, the better. And so the closer we get to the local church, the better. So this is pretty far away from the local church. It's not even a denomination. It's a group of folks, and so I think it should be used sparingly. But I do think it has a place for that. I question how effective we can be really debating some of the bigger issues. Yeah, I don't know if, and I know why they did it, but and I gained a little bit from it, but I'm not sure a half-hour panel is really going to solve a lot, especially
on this this kind of national scale. Now, I'll give Michael a chance to pick up his baby, and then he can ask or give his comments on this. I do think it is, I would guess, part of what motivated the panels, and maybe they said this out loud, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, Peter. I would guess part of what motivated the panels is the obvious fracturing in those who have been associated with Together for the Gospel over all kinds of different issues, political, theological, in general. And that this was, part of like, hey, let's leave it on showing how you can have these conversations. I would guess was part of what motivated that.
Absolutely correct. There was a lot of that in the critical race theory panel. That was the only thing that probably they could agree on, which was this is the way we should have, brothers and sisters getting together and talking civilly, giving each other grace and the benefit of the doubt, have these conversations. That's probably all they could agree on.
Yeah. And someday, Michael, I'm going to argue with someone that maybe the reformers model of arguing was maybe appropriate sometimes. Like the only question I have is Michael and I we were discussing in a meeting today Romans 11, and I will say if we disagreed more sharply than T4G was willing to over critical race theory, there is something wrong, because I at no point felt threatened by him or the fracturing of our, probably because it's local, as you were mentioning, Peter, probably because it's local in that context.
Even though I did at times say you're arguing like a Baptist or something like that.
Yeah. But Michael, any questions on this or any thoughts as you were hearing Peter talk about maybe the proper place for these?
Yeah, well, you will probably hear a baby feeding in the background because he's very loud while he's drinking from a bottle. But I was, so, obviously, we can get into why exactly they decided to bring this to an end. Why is it that they decided to do that? But I can't help but think, and a lot of us, I think, have thought that one of the reasons is because of this continued fracturing, where it just doesn't seem actually like you can do the same thing that when they started, it seemed like with the New Calvinist movement, hey, although we're obviously way different, all of us, hey, we can do this. But even you see that on the kind of, leadership level, with everything that went down with CJ Mahaney, it's like, oh, even this is a little bit like, how do you maintain this ideal across these different, denominational confessional bounds? And so I just assume that that's one of the reasons why they decided we have to bring it to an end anyway. And so that ties into this idea of the fracturing then because of social issues, CRT, any of those sorts of things.
Especially when it's not like a one-off conversation, a personal friendship, right? It is a long-term ministry, partnership. Michael, do you have any thoughts about the proper place, if at all, for these kinds of large scale national conglomerations and ministries?
So I am almost every day more and more, I find these things more and more suspect, and I am less and less clear on their value. Let's put it that way. I have seen benefit, right? Like I've benefited from going to conferences like this before. There's part of me that still, maybe it's because I like, evangelicalism is in my blood, right? I'm not, as much as we joke around about me being a dour, hardcore Presbyterian. The reality is I'm not at all, right? Like the hardcore Presbyterians probably would think that I'm pretty weak sauce on most things. But like I there's like, I want to see the value in it. I want to see the value in like, groups of people, especially from across these denominational and confessional bounds, coming together around the, kind of the ideal of the gospel. And yet, like you said, I think that you see benefit of that on a smaller level, right? So, you see that there can be significant benefit of that. Maybe, even here we have a picture of it, right? So Matt and I are both in a Presbyterian church. Here's Peter, he's in a Wesleyan church, and we're having a discussion about, kind of what is generally Baptistic evangelicalism, and New Calvinism. And, hey, this is great. Like this is fun. It's enjoyable. I think we'll probably all be edified from it in some way. But when you try to do that on this level of celebrity kind of entertainment culture, conferences in themselves, I think again, I don't want to say they're wrong. and I don't necessarily think they're wrong. I want to think of a way that they can work. And I like the idea of them. There was a local conference around here for kind of, farming and kind of homeschooling, Wendell Berry type, both Protestants and Catholics. It was basically it was mostly like Catholic, and there's a Catholic and a Lutheran guy put it on. But then, kind of more general Protestantism too, came and were a part of it. And it was really great. It was a great little conference. It was people from kind of all over the region, not necessarily just in La Crosse. And I really enjoyed this. But again, it's it was small enough that it still allowed a lot of very organic connection to people that can, with relationships that can be maintained. And when it comes to this kind of disconnected conferences where you go and you just go, I loved hearing, by the way, that most people that went as churches, right? Or cool. As big groups. I think that sounds fantastic. There's something that I think that can kind of maybe hedge some of the problems I'm talking about that I think are inherent in the system. And so anyway, at this point, I'm just ranting with a baby. But I can't bring myself, maybe it's the nuance in me, I can't bring myself to fully condemn it as there's no point to it. But being the kind of entertainment driven, celebrity driven culture that we're in, these things seem just inherently to be that, right? It's an extension of that.
This is a great time to shout out the Restless merch store, which will soon be carrying a shirt that just says nuance.
It's carrying it right now. It's live. Yeah. So this shirt is live. It just says nuance.
And I may force Pastor Michael to give one away to a listener every time he chooses nuance. But I actually think the other thing Peter modeled really well in going into one of these conference settings, and I think it's the true when you enter kind of any of these sort of, we might call them secondary institutions, right? If the church is the primary, right, the essential thing, these secondary institutions like seminary, conferences, these secondary missions organizations or action groups, whether they of any kind, going with you having a very specific purpose of why you're going, right? So you understand what I'm going there for, right? So when Peter says I'm going as an inspiring and growing preacher, and I'm going there to learn and consider it, I think that it is something that allows it, having any kind of just thought through purpose on these kinds of things allows them not to begin to become bigger than they are.
I think that's spot on, Michael. I think you're absolutely right there. The opportunity for mischief only increases if you're going there. Just someone said I should just go. You just go. You need to go. Why? I don't know. Just go. I agree. But if we're going, hey, this is the group of elders, we're going to go, or this is a group Sunday school class, we're going to go, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Yeah, we got a purpose. We got a plan. And I think any of these things can, like everything in our lives, can become an idol.
Yeah, that's a good point, Peter. So we have a few more questions. We don't want to keep you all night, but so at the conference, obviously it was a big deal that this was the last one. So what's the reasoning behind, as they were talking about it there, the end of T4G?
I don't know that there was an explicit reason given. I think the underlying reason we've already talked about was there's just too much. I think that I sort of gathered from Mark Dever and Ligon Duncan, who were the only two remaining. So Albert Mohler, even though it was in Louisville, stepped aside, stepped back. And I don't know whether he had stepped back last year as he was trying to run for the president of the SBC. He didn't get that, but I don't know if that was factored into that. I'm not really sure he was very supportive of it. I actually went to a lecture that he gave, or a panel he was on at the seminary the day before, So certainly very in the supportive of it. And Southern Baptist Theological Seminary had seminary had a very large
sick burn, unintentional sick burn.
had a very large booth and was a big sponsor of the proceedings. So I think one issue was we had run out of energy for that. Mark Dever's got other things he's doing. Obviously, Lincoln Duncan is very involved in RTS. So, and if Al Muller's not part of it, we may have just run out of energy to keep going.
Yep. Definite shout out to the king of RTS, as I call him, as he is the chancellor of all the campuses. I think that, let's be real. Like, when you think about the men that this is around, obviously we've already mentioned the fracturing, but even just the reality of they're all pretty old now. This is 18 years or whatever later when they started doing this. They're not spring chickens, right? Maybe they can still buy ripe bananas, but they have a lot of other things going on. They have moved into the positions of evangelicalism that I don't mean this in a negative way, they were aspiring to when they started this, right? This is past in those ways. So, but what's strange about it, this is what I find interesting, right? That there is they have a decreased energy for it. Obviously the audience is still there in force, right? 12,000 people were there. And obviously that number is going to be, and there's going to be numbers that are up because they said this is the last one, right? But there are still thousands of people that want to come to this every 2 years.
Yeah, I sat next to a delightful lady that was there with her church and was talking to her about it, and she was ready to go for another 16 years. She was ready, and she'd been to, I don't know when she started going, but she loved it. And I described it to someone. I said, if you love going to church, which I think all of us do, it's going to church for 3 days. If you just step back and take it at its just basic level, we sing three hymns, have a great message, sing 3 more, get up, go have something to eat, come back and do it again. And so that's, just at that level, that's pretty awesome.
Yep. Yeah. It's going to Baptist church for 3 days straight. We have a lot. We got a little bit more complicated stuff going on with.
Well, I apologize. Yes.
No, it's okay. It's great. We love it, and we're gonna give you it's our job to give you a bit of a hard time when that comes around. I think it obviously does sound great. There's a lot of great about that. The other thing you mentioned in one of our chats that we gave them a lot of credit when they announced this was the end because of these machines that are created, the jobs, the sponsors, right? And again, I mean this all in the best way. I don't necessarily mean that there's literally a nefarious person trying to run Christian conferences for, pure filthy lucre. But it's hard to shut, like any ministry of any kind, it's hard to say, it's time to shut this down. Right. And so we thought it was pretty
it's very commendable, right?
Yeah,
it's very commendable to be like, we're shutting this thing down for,
So you mentioned that they made some kind of an announcement that actually maybe it's more or less maybe morphing in form. I don't know. I want to let you describe
it.
So,
and I believe this is Mark Dever's project as well. It's called the Cross Conference. It's been around for a while. I know it's just not new, but it was a big, and maybe it is at every single T4G. Like I said, I've only been to one, but it was a major theme of this T4G was that the Cross Conference was something to go to. And the Cross Conference is only for young Christian leaders. I think 22, 24 years old is sort of the cutoff, and their leaders. So obviously a youth pastor or somebody might bring a group, and it's very mission related, missions focused. And so they did spend a fair amount of time talking about that. And there were I noticed a lot of the similar speakers. John Piper is a speaker. And obviously, I believe it's one of Mark Dever's projects. I'm not sure exactly what was involved with, but I know he's very involved. I know that the cross conference in January, I think it was this last January, had the same podium and stage decorations. So they just they used the same setup because they had pictures of it on there. I was like, oh, that's the same stuff. That's cool.
So they're just being thrifty. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's great.
Can't blame them.
And I was again, that's not to throw any disparagement. It's, listen, if the young generation is committed to missions, then that's glory to God on that. That would be great. But if you look back 16 years, how old I would have been and how old you would have been, we would have been at the cross conference.
So tell me, what were those ages again? I missed that.
So it is, I would say, high school through 22, 24. They mentioned it, and I apologize.
Yeah.
I don't know what the date was, but it was early 20s.
Wow. Yeah.
So again, 16 years ago, I would have been in my early 20s. Yeah. Someone would have been a little younger, but it feels like it's the next, we're gonna, what happens when those 18, 19 and 20-year-olds become 30?
Right.
Do we have another, it probably won't be Mark Dever at that point or Lincoln Duncan. It'll be someone else, but will they demand or want another conference? Or will one be crafted for them to sell them books? And thankfully, no candles. There were no candles for sale. It was just books.
They are rebooting the YRR. I think that is the only. And again, we have a great gratitude for the YRR, but that's what it sounds like, right? And so it's, it's not that, like, originally when you'd mentioned this, I was like, oh man, they're just renaming this thing so that they can keep it going. But no, I mean, I think that they are, Mark Dever at least, and he was one of the younger, right, of these men, right? He's on the younger side of them all, is ready to try and reboot the YRR, which likely comes with all the regular commendations we gave it and probably the same concerns probably once again. And so I just found it a fascinating thing occurring that you brought up.
Is there a concern that once you just get into that conference machine, right, like once you're involved, are you just never going to want to let it go? Kind of similar to where you get these extremely old rock stars and they're like, hey, I'm going to come back and do a tour of my greatest hits or those sorts of things. And it's like, well, it's really not working anymore, but it's like, we got to keep this going. We got to keep moving on with it. Or like, later in life, you're kind of running out of money and you're like, well, we better boot this back up so that, we can make it. Obviously, I don't think that's this case, but I do think there's something to that. Hey, once we've started this thing, we can't end it.
My hope is, I've listened to you guys talk a lot about this and listened to the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill and watched some of these folks. I hope that whatever the next movement looks like, that all of the celebrities of it, such that they are, I think a good test is going to be, are they submissive to some group, whether it's a board of elders or in your case a presbytery or what, because that to me, as we watched a lot of these folks fall, that is the common theme, that they are not submissive to anyone in their pastorate. So hopefully if cross conference is the next deal, that part of them, in addition to the missions focus, we focus a lot on ecclesiology and good church governance, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, it seems to me that the concern grows when you talk about, like, being under authority. One of the reasons that a more local or at least a smaller scale, and there's just I think there's something to be said just about the fact that as people we are small, and we're like, there's just our normal lives are never really I want to be careful in how I say this. I want to be nuanced in how I say this. There are very few situations in which It should be you connected to untold, thousands of people. There are very few reasons why I think that can be helpful or beneficial. I think sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it is beneficial and good. For the most part, the average way that we live, the average way we connect with people, the average way you can have friendships or close connections, it can't be a lot of people. But once you get to this point where even if, say, you have a presbytery that you're under, you have an elder board or something like that, when you're speaking to and are adored by, loved by, tens of thousands of people across the country, and you can go and speak at conferences whenever you want, there comes a point when, that authority that is over you it is easy to walk away from. And that doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. I'm not saying that. But it makes the potential temptation more, it comes easier, it leaves room for temptation in a way where, it's just not that easy if, you're in a position where that authority will much more directly affect you. Now, this is in general, right? As our communities have broken down, just generally in Western society, that's just true of most things, right? Like most authority doesn't really matter because there's not really any consequences that anybody can do to you. There's no social ostracization that really matters. Church discipline, obviously, well, I'll just go to a different church. It doesn't really matter to a lot of people. But I just wonder if that, that same kind of effect can then happen as you think about how somebody who has this really tremendous reach all of a sudden has these opportunities that would maybe more easily draw them away from the authority that they're under on a local level.
Is the rest? Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Well, no, and I was just trying to find it in my notes because we have this great notebook they give you when you go to the last word. But I believe it was Sinclair Ferguson, and it was someone else. I just can't find it in my notes here. Said something to the effect of, and maybe not an exact relationship to this, but if you are, if there is a lot of affection, was it not affection? If there was a lot of adulation versus affection, if people are fawning all over you versus really caring about you, that's when your ministry is going to be in peril. And it's when people really care about you that you're okay. If they're just fawning all over you and providing all this level of affection, or not affection, but adulation, that's when there's going to be problems.
And Restless listeners, don't worry. Pastor Michael is not yet out of control. This podcast can keep growing for a while.
That's
before
right.
that happens.
Wait till the Restless conference comes, and
we recently had someone come on simply to tell me I was wrong. So we love you. We love everyone. Peter, before we head out here, is there what's the last word on T4G from you? Is there any other section you'd encourage people to look at, or anything we haven't asked you about, simply because we aren't something we weren't aware of that would be great for our listeners to hear about?
I would just encourage, if you want some good preaching, go on the T4G website. I'm not promoting it, and listen to the names on there that you don't recognize. I think you'll benefit. We only have, obviously, each one of us only have so much time in the day and so much time in the week. But I would, while they're all good sermons, there's some particularly good ones that I think you'll be edified by. And I have a sort of a theory about one of the faults in Reformed theology, and that is we put such a
I love it.
Yeah, we put such an emphasis on the preaching of the word, which I'm in complete agreement with. Yes, do it in season, out of season. Let's get after it. But because we put so much emphasis on it, those individuals that can do it well, we promote and we encourage and we lift up, because we say, well, listen, this is what we want to do. We want to be better at this. And so if there is no perfect theology this side of heaven, in my belief. There's the best we can get in our sinful, fallen world. But if there's one thing that's in the Reformed world that I think is we have to constantly be watching for, is that celebrity status. is taking the pastor that is really good, promoting him, and then putting him on these big platforms. And to Pastor Michael's point, no man can withstand that. Maybe for a season they can, but for a lifetime of public ministry, that is very difficult. And I would even look to the great reformers, and you can see them in their later years start to struggle. Luther, he in his later life said some, wrote, I guess, some things that, frankly, we would find abhorrent today. Calvin, in some of his, the way he dealt with folks he disagreed with, I don't think we would endorse that today. And so it's very difficult for one man to do that. And so if there's one thing that we always have to be careful of, and it's baked into the cake, we love preaching, but there's more to the Christian life than preaching. And so we've got to have the whole of it. And those individuals that just get promoted because they're very good preachers, we just have to just proceed with caution, in my opinion.
Without a doubt, that is a great point about being a Christian and being a pastor, that there is more to preaching in the role. Another time we can debate the reformers and their basedness or their issues. I should perhaps, as we started with the books, right now T4G is having a closeout sale on all the books they did not give away. But I will warn you, at least price check them against Amazon, because some are still lower. But Peter, I think that was a great place to leave it. Thank you for spending some time with Restless tonight.
Thanks, guys. Keep up the good work. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Restless. It was great having Peter on. Pastor Michael, we need some ratings and reviews, don't we?
Yes, we do. Our ratings have slowed. They've just, we've really stopped pushing it for quite a while, but there's still plenty of you that listen to us every week who have not rated or reviewed the show. And so we want you to go and do that. Go and rate and review on iTunes, especially, or wherever else. Yeah. So we have tons of Restless stickers that we want to give away. So number one, if you rate and review the show and you email us at restlesspodcasting@gmail.com, we will send you a sticker. And every month now, from here on out, as long as we remember to do it, every month we're going to be sending out a book to a random reviewer or somebody who rates or reviews anywhere that they listen to the podcast. And make sure that we know that you did it. You have to tag us on social media or send us a picture of it or something, screenshot, and then we will send you for sure a sticker and maybe a book. So make sure that you do that, and maybe you'll win.